Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone asked you how you were doing? Like, really doing, and actually wanted an honest answer? Because here's the truth, most men won't tell you, even if you ask. And worse, most men never get asked. I'm Dr. Daniel Bates. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I've spent the last 16 years working with men in individual counseling, couples counseling. I've worked with fathers who are making the transition to fatherhood, who have teens, men in recovery and addiction, men dealing with porn, alcohol use, substance use. You name the counseling context, I've worked with it. I've worked with men through anger, depression, addiction, shame, father wounds, emotional shutdown, and everything in between. And I've also walked through a lot of those issues myself. My learning of psychology and counseling models, but it's also borne out through a lot of my own experiences. I grew up with a dad who was there, but was distant, not abusive, just emotionally absent. And there was a lot of dysfunction in my home growing up. So I learned early on to not feel, to don't talk, don't cry, just get through it, tough it out. For me, it turned into rage, and not just external anger at the world and things going on, but it turned inward. I was angry at myself. I blamed myself. Why can't I be better or different? And that rage festered. It consumed me. It was like acid poisoning me, corroding me from the inside out. And I would just sit and burn with it. And there was no outlet. There was no words for it. There was just the pressure build up with no outlet. Nobody checking in, no one asking. Me not knowing how to ask for someone to ask about me, to check in with me. And that rage became anxiety. And eventually that turned into depression. But here's what changed everything for me. I realized I didn't have to live like that. I could talk about what I could feel differently. Mind blowing, right? I could actually feel differently. I could choose to behave differently and eventually live differently. That realization changed everything. And that's why I do what I do now. I feel like I want to pass it on. I was a boy who had a lot of man problems, but I was able to kind of work through them and learn and grow and understand. And now I kind of want to pass that off to other men. It's made me sensitive to where other men are struggling. And not every man's struggle is the same. Not every man's journey is the same, but I feel an acute sensitivity to where men struggle. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. So in the United States, men account for nearly 80% of all suicides. And that's not just the United States. That's Canada, Great Britain, Australia, several European countries. Many countries are dealing with pretty much the same suicide rate among men. Men die by suicide at a rate that is nearly 4 times higher than women. Middle-aged men, especially white men, have the highest suicide rate of any group. And men are far less likely to seek therapy or talk to a doctor about mental health issues. So high struggles, low talking about struggles, kind of messed up, right? But it's not just about suicide. Men are more likely to cope through alcohol and drugs. Men are more likely to express emotional pain through anger or isolation, what researchers have identified as externalization. More likely to die younger from stress-related diseases like heart disease, high blood pressure. And so this isn't just a physical health issue. It's a cultural crisis that overlaps or feeds into a mental health trend or crisis. And it's been hiding in plain sight for decades. So why aren't men talking about what's going on inside? Well, kind of you can see from my story, we weren't really raised to. And this is when we're touching on the cultural piece here. The culture is not attentive to the needs of boys and anticipating those needs and then teaching boys the things we need to prevent the problem. It's my very inarticulate way of summarizing the problem. So, from the time we're boys, we're told things like don't cry, man up, be strong, don't be weak. Very explicit messages, but there's a lot of implicit messages too. Just not checking in, not asking. Kind of that was more in my case. There was an implied lesson that I learned from no one checking in and asking me about how I felt. So that message was very loud and clear, spoken and unspoken in my childhood. Emotions weren't safe. If I shared my emotions, I felt slammed down, or they weren't respected. They weren't taken seriously. And then, even more so, they weren't considered masculine. I wanted to be manly. I wanted to measure up. So I started to bury my emotions. But here's the problem. And this is such a profound realization. Buried emotions don't go away. I've often used the analogy with clients that buried emotions are like dirty dishes. I'm in the habit of putting my dishes in the sink. And then once they're in the sink, they kind of just don't exist anymore in my head, but they still exist in the sink. And so then I go back to the non-existent dishes with more dishes. And then those dishes start to stack up, pile up, one after another. And then all it takes is just, let's say, my smallest little fork. Just put that on top, and the whole thing comes crashing down. So that's my dish analogy. But in real life, the way that plays out, it could look like getting arrested or going to rehab or having a judge order you to counseling or having your wife leave or your kids going no contact with you. It gets real, real fast. So psychologists have called this normative male alexithymia, which is just a kind of a fancy term for something really simple. Most men were never taught how to express their emotions. So it's not that they lack the emotion, they lack the language to identify it, to name it, and then to effectively process and work through it. And then there's this other thing called stigma. There is a lot of stigma among men. If men were its own little ecosystem and culture, which it is, we do not talk about mental health. We do not like mental health. It is bad and icky. That's stigma. Even in 2025, a lot of men still believe asking for help means something is wrong with, that it makes them less of a man, that they should be able to handle their issues on their own. I've heard it dozens of times in my practice. I'm not the kind of guy who asks for therapy. I don't know why I'm here. I'm not the kind of person who does this. I just need to get back on track. This is unusual for me. I shouldn't be here. I should be out there. Or this is just a weird phase I'm in. It's not a phase. It's a pattern. And it keeps men stuck in silence. Then there's this. Even when men want to talk about what they're feeling, oh, this is so deep. They don't know how, and they're not provided the context or the space that's receptive to it. So counseling can be part of the problem, right? I am in a profession that might be adding to the problem. So I don't want to make this about therapy. I want to kind of shift it back to men. We'll talk about the problems with therapy and the approach to men in therapy. We'll talk about that down the road, but maybe in future videos. But I want to go back to you. So you don't know how to talk about what you're feeling and experiencing. A lot of men, they try to describe their inner world and it's just like a void, right? Like, what is that in there? I've been there too. For the longest time, I didn't know how to say I was feeling anxious or depressed. I said things more physical, body based. I said things like I'm tired or I just don't know. I'm irritated. I kind of went to anger and the synonyms related to anger: irritated, annoyed, frustrated. Now, if you find yourself using that language on a regular basis, that's an indicator to you that something deeper is going on. I didn't like going to those more vulnerable emotions. The men I work with, they like to stay in anger and not go to that deeper level. But not knowing what you feel, what you were feeling, doesn't mean you're broken. It's a starting place. Consider this your starting point. And what it could mean is that just no one's ever showed you. No one's ever taken the time to understand you and how this is a struggle. but it's been a problem, right? And so what I want to suggest is that things can change, that you can change, and that this is a starting point. And let me please hear me clearly on this. I'm not about bashing masculinity or dogging on it. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are a lot of beautiful, wonderful elements of traditional masculinity that are to the culture, that are necessary, in my opinion, and are protective to your mental health, that we need to put under the microscope and say, yeah, if we could get creative and make some reconfigurations here and maybe alter or adjust these elements of masculinity, things like stoicism, emotional restrictiveness, hyper independence, kind of do it yourself elements, the John Wayne mentality, the lone wolf, I call it in counseling sometimes. If we could get creative with those pieces and reconfigure them so that it starts promoting your physical and emotional and relational health instead of just hurting and harming you, without having to erase your masculinity, but let's just kind of refine it. Let's build it. Let's maximize it so that you're no longer doing harm or hurt to yourself or others, but like let's equip and empower you to be your best self, to be your most manly, healthy self. And so I think when men have undergone this transformation, those pieces that have allowed them to survive in the past, but not thrive in the present, that's where the magic happens, right? So I want to help men get away from isolating, and I want to help men get more out into the open, more connecting, and more engaged with themselves, with their inner life, and with other relationships, with other men. I kind of want to build a culture of men that are excited by growth and development. So masculinity doesn't mean you have to emotionally numb yourself. You can be masculine and connected to your feelings. That's not weakness. That's growth. That's maturity. So let's talk about why this moment in time makes this conversation more urgent than ever. The last few years have created a perfect storm. Remember COVID-19? Remember that? I remember that being a really hard time. COVID-19 disconnected us. The work from home, blurred routines, gyms, churches, and other outlets where men found connection, they disappeared. Men often connect through things, through interests, through hobbies. And so the opportunity to engage in those things, interests, and hobbies that were restricted from COVID-19 pandemic and all that stuff, it just wiped out men's ability to connect. And so we saw divorce rates rise. We saw substance abuse and misuse and addiction went up through the roof, and loneliness skyrocketed. Men are now more lonely than ever and more disconnected than ever. So that's why I was talking earlier about like, hey, let's get out of the darkness and into the light and start engaging with ourselves and with others. And for many men who were already struggling silently, they were pushed further to the edge, further into isolation and into the darkness. I saw it in my clients. I felt it in myself. So when the activities that held us together disappeared, remember all those interests and hobbies and activities, the emotional cracks got louder, and a lot of men had no one to turn to because they were never taught how to. And I think men just don't want to. They don't want to deal with counseling and support. So what now? We don't fix this by just saying men need to open up. That's part of it. We fix this by creating some new conditions. We build spaces where emotional honesty is respected, not judged. We teach boys that crying isn't weakness, it's human. We show fathers how to model emotional intelligence and awareness. We normalize therapy and peer support and vulnerability. Forget therapy, just a culture where we can be honest and true to ourselves and get help. How about that? It doesn't always have to be therapy. We can kind of start this here in this video, maybe in the comment section. Maybe you watch this video and then you go connect with one other guy. You can be a change agent. Have you heard that language before? an agent of change in your own life, in your own little sphere. But maybe that's too ambitious. So just start with this video and maybe engaging with me and engaging with someone who's also going to comment on this video. But so let me get back to my topic here. We can expand our definition of masculinity, and I think that's important. Not erase it, not deconstruct it, expand it. So you don't have to be a rock. You don't have to carry everything alone. You don't have to pretend that you're fine when you're not. You can be a man and still need help. You can be masculine and still feel deeply. You can heal and still lead. That's the expanded masculinity. So if you've been holding it all in and it's burning you up inside like it was me, know this, that you're not broken, you're not weak. You don't have to keep living that way. There's another path. I've walked it. So have many others. And you can find the light at the end of the tunnel and the new path. You can do it too. So I do this professionally, but I'm doing this YouTube video to kind of start something, because I think a lot of people go to YouTube. A lot of people watch videos and consume content. I don't see that many men in therapy. I want to see more men in therapy, but I think I'm more likely to engage a man who needs it the most here in this video, and not necessarily in my counseling office. So again, I want to emphasize that consider this the beginning. So over the next 29 days, I'm going to start exploring some of the basic building blocks of men's mental health in a series of videos. So we're going to talk about emotions, anger, shame, fatherhood, sex, purpose, meaning, healing. I'm going to start talking about the one thing that men struggle the most with is emotional awareness. So this video is kind of laying the groundwork. It's kind of getting a bird's eye view of some of the issues. Hopefully I can connect with you on a personal level. Hopefully you can get to see that I've lived this, and I have 2 masters, a bachelor's degree. I have 16 years of counseling expertise. I've written research studies. I've written books on this. But I think really what it comes down to is that thing I said earlier. I'm sensitive to where those struggle points are for men. I've lived it. I've worked with it, and I know that there's something better on the other side of it. There's a way of getting through it. So in the video coming tomorrow, and I hope you're stick around and watch that, I'm going to get into what are we feeling? What do we do with the feeling? How do I process it, verbalize it, get help, support? So I'm going to get into some of the nitty gritty, but do me a favor. One thing that would mean a lot to me is if you subscribed and if you stuck around. I want to hear in the comment section. I want to start to build that culture and that community of men really discussing and engaging with this, refining each other, sharpening each other, building each other up. I don't see that at all online. I see men tearing each other down. So I want to start building each other up. So let's do this work together, because men's mental health matters, and so do you.